Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror and detail, the realm where the shadows whisper ancient secrets and nightmares come to life. I am your guide through the darkness, and on this channel, we delve into the spine-chilling world of Wendigo horror stories that will send shivers down your spine. First story, Dark Figure in Forest. My friend Sean's neighbors own this big forest next to their farm. His neighbors don't mind him going into the forest once he doesn't go in their farm. Today Sean invited me and my friends Zach, Carl, and Declan. We arrived at around 5 p.m. We played basketball for a while until Zach said that we should go to the forest since it was getting dark and it would be something spooky to do since it's almost Halloween. We walked up the long pathway to the forest surrounded by a short electrical fence. Once we reached the entrance to the forest, we noticed that the landowner had put up a fence to the entrance. It was electrical, but there was a way past it. Sean and Declan went ahead while me, Carl, and Zach walked in a minute after them. As soon as we entered, we couldn't see Sean or Declan anywhere. Zach and Carl were walking and talking about the weird mushrooms on the ground until we all heard this weird laughter. It was nothing like Sean or Declan's voice, so we knew it wasn't them. A second later, I see Sean and Declan run down out of the forest into the pathway to the next forest. I told Zach and Carl, and we went on after them. It took us a bit to get out of the forest because Zach got stuck. Once we got out and started walking, I noticed Sean and Declan a little bit behind us. There is no way they could have looped around the entire forest in 5 minutes. As soon as I saw them, I got really confused and then pretty scared. Sean and Declan explained that they just got out of the forest and saw a man in a gray jacket somewhere in or around the forest. We got pretty freaked out, so we decided to keep on walking ahead to the next forest. Sean was talking about an abandoned tree house further ahead in the next forest, so that's what we wanted to see next. Once we found the entrance, a bunch of cows came over to the edge of the fence next to us and started staring at us. The cows didn't make a sound, they just stared. Zach went in first and I followed after him. While everyone was talking, I noticed a dark figure at the end of the forest. I told Declan, but the dark figure was gone as soon as I looked back. Zach walked into the other entrance and found a white bag with blood in it and a ripped sticker. There was also needles and blood smeared all over the trees. As soon as we noticed it, the cows started mooing really loudly. Zach refused to go any further after seeing that, and the rest of us agreed that we should get back home. Carl was walking slightly ahead of us, and he apparently saw a dark figure in the distance. The whole walk back, I felt like I was being watched. Second story, the Wendigo learned to tell time on Thanksgiving. I know what you're thinking. A mythical spirit being able to tell time isn't necessarily a bad thing. I'm here to tell you it's necessarily a bad thing. A horrible thing, in fact. Without the ability to tell time, the Wendigo would strike randomly, out of nowhere, maybe going decades or centuries without attacking. But maybe I'm being too naive. Maybe the Wendigo has made me naive, cloaking its murders in various, everyday seeming tragedies. I live out in the country, miles away from the excitement of city life, of neon sin shrouded in innocent novelty. Somehow, though, the chaos of city life found me. My father told me as long as you stay in the house you've lived in all your life, nothing could harm you. Like a fool, I believed him. I followed in my father's footsteps, and it led to my ruin. A kindly neighbor, Joe, moved in next door, although next door is a bit misleading since acres separate humans from each other out here. He was younger, spry, and full of beans. He had a wife, a quiet woman named Jennifer, and one child, barely 5 months old. Despite being at heart a good-natured fellow, he seemed stressed out because the child, Desmond, kept slipping from one illness to the next. One day things seemed especially bad, around Thanksgiving time if I recall. The leaves had all but been sucked off the trees, and it had been raining all day. I didn't have a good feeling about that day. Something seemed off, a little too dismal. I had been thinking bad thoughts ever since the sun woke me up. The objective observer would tell you that this was because my wife expired a few months before, and that I still hadn't come out the other side yet, you know? But I know. The Wendigo, well, let's put it this way. When the Wendigo wants you to know he's coming, he'll give you clues the day before, sometimes the week before. Anyway, I told Joe about the Wendigo, about how if you knew what you were doing, you could make the spirit give your child, or anyone, a more stable flame of life if it was sputtering for some reason. He looked at me like I was crazy or something. I knew I wasn't. Eventually, he caught on, realizing a man with such sure convictions couldn't be wrong. I gave Joe the scroll I used to save my wife from the brink so many years ago. I told him the fine print was something worth reading, that if you performed the ritual in a wrong way, the Wendigo would be as clear-minded about mortal affair as you or me, be able to tell time. Insert himself into the flow of our reality without missing a beat. Well, I won't go into too much detail about what happened, or how it happened. Joe performed the ritual wrong, as I knew he most likely would. But I just couldn't let a kid die, you know? I went to Joe's house for Thanksgiving. He knew I was a lonely old man who had just lost his wife. Usually, I wasn't one for a pity invite, but I figured I didn't want to spend the hours ticking off the seconds in my head and waiting for the axe to fall. Better to keep yourself busy. I'll never be able to get that grisly scene out of my head as long as I live. Joe's body was spread out on the coffee table, his face looking miserable and defeated. Jennifer's corpse rested in the fireplace. The lights had been turned off except for a single dim bulb hanging from the kitchen ceiling. Desmond sat at the kitchen table, gnawing on his dad's fingers. He stared at me curiously, like a cat often stares at its master when eating its meal. "Oh, why did you do it, Joe? You gave the scroll to an idiot." A man so addled at the prospect of losing his son, of being outside the pleasant rhythm of society, that he'd do just about anything in order to make sure his son stayed alive, Desmond said. His eyes were bleeding sockets, and it occurred to me that was how my dad said the Wendigo entered a human body, through the eyes, making them explode. "Would you like a finger? Maybe a thigh?" "It is Thanksgiving after all." Desmond gave me a wicked smile. A smile no child of 5 months should be capable of. "Now you just stay right there. Don't come any closer," I said in a firm voice. Joe just had to read the scroll in front of his wall clock. So desperate to save his son he couldn't read the fine print, Desmond went on. Surprisingly, Desmond didn't try to kill me that day. He told me my time was coming, and that I'd know when my curtain would flow across the dusty stage of my life when he wanted me to know. Then he got up, told me not to disturb his great feast because he would be back to devour them in their entirety. So many months have passed since then. The Wendigo devoured his victims, and it was like they never existed at all. Now I'm staring at my own wall clock, thinking every day the axe might fall. The Wendigo can tell time now, and he can confer with the Reaper, know the date and time of my death, and say, "I know this old man should die via electrocution, but let me lend a helping hand." Third story. Interesting encounter in Michigan forest. This is a true story that happened when I was 16, maybe 17 in the woods in Leelanau County, Michigan. I was on vacation with family in northern Michigan when we visited a family friend who had lived in the center of the county, in a dense forest. I remember when we pulled up the road the house was on was a gravel road instead of a paved road. I remember looking down the gravel road and seeing it go down a hill and turn to the left in the forest. A few hours passed by, and I decided to go and check out where the gravel road went. I remember feeling extremely nervous because we were in black bear country, as I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, and never experienced bears before. When I had gotten to the top of the hill, I remember hearing birds chirping and lots of frogs croaking. The forest felt alive, and I did not feel terribly unsafe, only nervous because of the possible presence of bears. As I started walking down the hill, I started whistling the Hunger Games four-tone whistle. As I got midway down the hill, I noticed that the birds and frogs stopped making noise, and the forest fell silent. At this point, my instincts kicked in and I knew something was wrong. I remembered learning that the forest goes silent when there's a predator around. Yet, I still kept going down the hill. I was determined to know what was at the bottom of the hill. I was still whistling the same four-tone whistle when I heard something whistle it back perfectly. It made the same exact sound that I made. It sounded very oddly humanoid, like there was a person watching me, a predator. I remember being frozen in fear, just staring at the area of forest that it came out of before turning around and walking back up the hill. When the house came into view again, I sprinted until I got inside and did not leave anyone's eyesight for the rest of the night. Since then, I have not had any encounters like this, and I have never been back to the area. I don't know if it was something paranormal or an actual person watching me. Both equally terrify me to this day. If anyone knows any legends from northern Michigan/Leelanau County, Michigan, please let me know. Fourth story. The forest is angry. It's looking for me, and I don't know how much time remains before it will take its claim on me, just like it did everyone else that came here as part of our group. Even now I hear the shrieks and screams of its victims from my rescue team as it approaches. I don't know how many of us remain, but I doubt any of us will escape. Have you ever realized how terrifying a forest actually is? No matter how familiar you are with the wilderness or how well you know that particular forest, it can always turn against you, especially if you disrespect it and treat it unkindly like we did. I can already picture you, sitting safely while you read this from your phone or laptop and rolling your eyes at me. Let me paint you a picture. Bear with me. The paths twist and turn, and it doesn't matter how straight of a line you walk if the forest has decided to keep you there. You'll wander within the trees, forever lost just like I am. You'll never escape. The entire time, you'll hear the screams that might be a fox, but you can't entirely be sure because something about it sounds just uncannily off. A family from the city had wanted to go camping off the grid, probably inspired by some influencer on social media, and had chosen one of the rare public lands still available. They missed their scheduled check-in date with their friend back home. Then the next day passed without a check-in before their friend finally called in a missing person report. The fool waited too long. The stupid myth about waiting 24 hours has hurt so many. If they'd only called sooner, when the family missed their first check-in, we may have had some chance at finding the family. I've long given up the search at this point. I just want to get out of the forest and return home to my own family waiting for me. I no longer see the copter that had flown over the previous days to keep watch on the search party. It's not because the canopy is too thick either. I think they just gave up looking for us. Perhaps they can't keep looking for us and our doomed fate is sealed. I need to move faster. The last scream wasn't as far away as other screams before had been. Whatever hunts us cannot be too far from me. I have thought about finding a place where I can hide, but I fear that will only trap me so that my end arrives sooner. As long as I keep moving forward, maybe I will yet find an exit to this accursed forest. There were hundreds of us that came into this forest to find the family. I don't know if we'll be reported in the news. The family wasn't, but they were a much smaller group. The only reason I even knew about the family, 2 teenage girls and their parents, is because of my volunteer position as a search and rescuer. None of the locals had heard anything more than the forest was temporarily closed to the public. The ranger even tried to stop me until I showed him my pass, and he still didn't really want to let me in. I have no clue what hunts us. I haven't seen it yet. As far as I know, it could just be a rabbit with sharp pointy teeth. Hell of a terrifying rabbit if you ask me. I had seen the remains from a few of its attacks, and it turned my stomach in disgust and fear. One in particular stands out in my memory. Her face was frozen in a perpetual scream, while her eyes shifted wildly from side to side. I was intrigued, much like stumbling upon a horrible accident. It was upsetting to see, yet I found that I couldn't look away. The attack was so recent that I doubted anything had arrived to alter the details. I was frozen. My heart pounded in my chest, and my breath was short, rapid gasps as I witnessed just what will become of me in time. A horsefly landed on my exposed skin and chomped down, which pulled me to my senses. If the attack was this recent, then the creature mustn't be far. I increased my speed and haven't slowed much since. Everything was fine at first. Nothing out of the ordinary happened until after our first night. Quite a few of us had set up our tents close together to avoid being alone out here. We had another 3 days to finish our comb of the forest unless we found them sooner. The forest is huge, and I could see other campfires in the far distance, marking other groups that had come together. I wonder if they escaped our fate, or if they are hunted as well. Our camp spot was probably the largest, about 60 of us all together, though a few were sharing their tents, so we didn't have as many tents put together. I was one of the few that was alone in their tent, either because the tent was too small to share, or because the tent owner didn't bring their spouse with them, or both. My wife had stayed home while I searched in order to tend to our children. I missed her that first night, but now I am glad she's back home. Whatever happens, I can rest knowing that she doesn't share my fate, as that would destroy me. I wish I could call her, but the reception out here isn't strong enough to make any calls. We packed up the next morning, and I left before all of the trash had been picked up, though none of the remaining trash was mine. However, I was in the group, and I assumed the forest considered me a member of the guilty party. If I had stayed and ensured everything was picked up, maybe none of us would be running terrified through a forest from some unknown horror. Maybe it wasn't just the trash, but also how rowdy and loud we'd been the night before as we belted out songs and blasted our music, which upset some local fauna trying to nest in the trees. I didn't realize anything was off until that afternoon when I began to hear screams of pain and fear. I don't know how many dead I have stumbled upon since that first attack, nor how many still remain. We all ran to the first screams of agony that echoed through the trees. Nobody saw the creature, but we all saw the scattered body parts that had been torn apart and flung. Nothing looked as though it had been eaten, and the only thing missing were their supplies. We searched nearby, but shortly after heard another scream. As I turned to help, an arm smacked into my face hard enough to bring blood to my lip. The hand was still twitching as blood pooled from the end. I turned towards where I remembered the entrance to be and ran. It's been 2 days now. I run full out for a bit, then slow down to a steady jog. Occasionally I stop to make sure the line I traveled remained straight. I shouldn't be lost. I grew up playing in this very forest, and I know it just as well as you know your neighborhood, probably better. Yet the familiar trees don't seem to be in the place I know they belong, as if they move around when I am not looking in order to confuse and keep me within. I've now found a cavern that I will hide in for the night. The sun is setting and I need my rest. Besides, it is dangerous to run through the forest at night. You could trip or run straight into the very thing that is hunting you. I think I found the missing supplies from all the victims. There's 53, which means that 6 others are still out there running. The creature won't think to look for me among its trophy collection. It's here. It's in the cave. I can hear it snuffling around. I think it can smell me or knows that I am here because it keeps coming near and sniffing near my hiding place. Hopefully it will decide that all it smells is the victim's scent on their bags and I can. No, it's throwing the bags to clear out the area. I'm going to post this now so the world may know what happened to us. Then I will turn my phone's light on and see what hunts me. I will die with my question answered. Respect the forest. It has had enough of our shit. Fifth story. Cult surrounding a forest cryptid. I have always been a fairly spiritual person. I believe in the paranormal, and I believe that there are things that just must be explained with the paranormal. I also find myself intrigued by the paranormal. I decided to go with my friend to find paranormal things around Pittsburgh. I have many stories to tell, but I am going to tell this one. We used a pretty infamous app called Randonautica. It brought us to one random location. I cannot remember the intention set. When we arrived, it was in one of the large parks. Our location was a little bit into the forest. I pick up a lot of spiritual energy from this area, so we go deeper to investigate. I stop and see a very strange-looking tree and comment, "That is a strange-looking tree." My friend responds, "That is not a tree." Spoiler alert. It was likely a flesh pedestrian. As we escaped from here as fast as we could, we ran back to our car and proceeded to watch lines and lines of cars pulling out of this building buried in this part of the forest. I was still having a really weird gut feeling about it, even with the protection spell we used. I felt off about that flesh pedestrian, like it was particularly powerful. I have no reason to believe it was a cult, but it certainly felt very strange. Call me a clickbaiter. And it's safe to say we got the heck out of the Dodge. Sixth story. I remember the last time my parents left me at home by myself. I don't know why, but I'd share something that I still can't explain after all these years. I was 16, last year of high school, and my family had just moved to the outer suburbs of the city. Parents had left me alone for the night to go out, so I ordered pizza and watched some movies. What can I say? I wasn't exactly prom king material. Anyway, after finishing off 2 large pizzas by myself, like a boss, I decided to clear out the trash rather than having the living room stink of anchovies and cheese. So I went out the back door, only to have our 10-year-old husky Conan jump on me, trying to get into the pizza boxes in my hand. Whatever. Dropped the boxes, and he starts flicking them with his nose. "Wanna come inside?" I asked him, but Conan just ignored me. It was late summer and huskies really enjoyed the nighttime weather. After a while, he got bored and walked off towards the back fence, obviously having dug a nice hole in the ground to curl up in. I picked up the empty pizza boxes and went through the side gate, walking out onto the curb where our trash cans were. It was night, but with the street lights you could see where the trash cans were on the curb. Out of the corner of my eye was this hulking mass down the road. The street lights were sparse enough that I could only see its shadow and the trash can it knocked out onto the street. It had to be a bear. It just had to be. Then I heard the most guttural, feral growl I had ever heard. I just noped. There was some sort of base instinct deep inside me that told me to get out of there as fast as I could. Like millions of years of evolution, had embedded the most basic of survival reflexes. There was a teeny tiny part of me that wanted to see a bear in the flesh, maybe get a video of it and post it on the internet. I didn't even stop to consider it though as I scrambled back to the side gate, so fast I was setting records. That animal though, it must have seen me, thought I looked better to eat than the trash it was going through. Because as soon I headed towards the house, I heard this heavy stomping running down the street. I don't know what I was thinking. I probably wasn't because I didn't even bother opening the gate, I just jumped over it. High jump superstar right here. Not bothering to look back, I headed straight inside and called the cops. I know. What would the cops do? Charge the bear with trespassing? Arrest Yogi and throw him in jail with a picnic basket? I was 16. I had never run into a bear, and I sure as shit was not going to call my parents. The phone rang as I frantically ran from one window to another, looking out for cuddly bundle of fun that wanted to crack me open like a honey pot. No sign of him. The phone picked up. 911, what's your emergency? Said the voice of an unenthusiastic woman.
Are you?
I'm stuck inside and I think there's a bear stalking me. A bear, you say? She said slightly less unenthusiastically. That's when I got my first glimpse of it. I was looking out a front window when I saw it come into view right on my front lawn. It was big, like a bear. But then it stood up. I wasn't a 16-year-old expert on bears or anything, but I was pretty sure they didn't stand upright on their hind legs like a person. In the dark, I couldn't get a good look at its fur, but just guessing from the silhouette it cast, it had to have been 10 foot tall, and let me tell ya, when it turned its head to look through the window right at me, I had never felt the strength drain out of my body as fast since then. I collapsed onto the ground, barely holding the phone in my hands. Did you say a bear, kid? Said the woman on the phone. I shook my head yes. I then came to my senses a little bit and said yes. Is it just you in the home? Yes. My mom and dad are out.
All right. Sit tight, sweetie.
We'll get someone out there right away. After telling her my address, she hung up and I just sat there in the darkness, hoping that this nightmare would be over. I didn't know what that thing was and I didn't want to find out. Hopefully somebody else could deal with it and I could go back to life as normal. If I just waited. Howling pierced the silence. It was Conan. I had left Conan outside. Scared, my thoughts racing in my head. I army crawled through the house, through the kitchen, into the living room. My legs sprang me upwards and I saw, through the back door window, Conan standing at the side gate, howling. I wanted to scream out, command that dog to shut up. The words nearly escaped my mouth before my hands involuntarily trapped them inside. I was too scared to scream out, too scared to come out of hiding, too scared to face that creature, to save my dog. Time slowed down. Conan had been a good dog to me. All the times we played together when he was a puppy, the nights when he curled up into a ball and slept on my bed, the sandwiches he stole from the bench, the tummy rubs, the head pats, the games of fetch. All of that was about to disappear because he wouldn't stop howling. No, it was about to disappear because I was too scared. I don't think I've ever done anything as dumb in my life ever again, but I ran out to save my best friend. I almost pulled the back door off its hinges, and with eyes only focused on my dog, I charged and tackled Conan. Thankfully, his howling stopped. It was only when I turned to the gate that I found out why. It was no damn bear. I got a full view of this creature, and to this day I still don't know what it was. I don't know how I missed it, but I saw its antlers. Its face was more like a deer, but it was bearing fangs like a bear. It was tall, taller than the gate, and it had its claws reaching over the top of the gate. Its eyes yellow. Those yellow eyes were just staring at us. I didn't stare too long back, because I picked Conan up and carried him back inside. When I slammed the door, I heard something crash outside. I didn't look, but I just knew that the creature had broken the gate. I froze on the spot. Conan did too. He had his ears pinned back and laid down on the floor. Those same heavy footsteps from before came to the back door, and I started to hear sniffing. Just sniffing, from the door handle and then down to the bottom of the door. Then it stopped. The footsteps moved away from the door and started going alongside the house. When it reached a window, I could see it was now on all fours, just prowling outside the house. After a while, the footsteps disappeared. The police said they took 5 minutes, but it seemed like forever. They asked what happened and I told them about the creature, how it stood up, how it had a deer's head, how it looked at me with its yellow eyes. They just laughed. When Mom and Dad came home, They were pissed that the gate was broken. None of them believed me that I saw that creature. But I'm telling you, I don't know what I saw that day, but it was no damn bear. There are some creatures still out there that remain undiscovered. Seventh story. A figure in the forest. During the year 2018, I had several paranormal experiences. One of the two that stand out to me as the most prolific is the entity I saw in a tree line whilst on a walk. This time in my life was tumultuous, so I spent much of my time trying to help my mental health with lots of outdoor therapy. I walked at least once a day for miles at a time, mostly in my immediate neighborhood. My favorite time to go walking was at night in the summer when it was cool and there weren't people out and about, mostly allowing me to just breathe and embrace silence. One night, as my normal routine commanded I do, I stepped off around 2100 hours. It was a moonlit, warm, and comfortable summer night, genuinely perfect on all accounts for a long walk. As I recall this night, I decided not to listen to music or mess around with my phone, mostly because I just wanted to think and enjoy the time I had to myself. I also sometimes did this because I wanted to be more attuned with my surroundings, because people be crazy. I decided I would take my longer route that brought me to the biggest park in town with some really nice trails behind that I dared not walk at night because that was way too dark and scary. This night, I did not need to find fear on trail. As I marched forward up the winding road to the park and further into the actual confines of the park, I decided to walk alongside one of the surrounding tree lines. In all reality, I was about 20 meters or so away from the trees and moving at a leisurely pace. I was looking around and enjoying the pleasant night so far when I saw it, walking along the trees directly parallel with me. And at my same pace, there was something completely dressed in white, clear as ever in the moonlight. For whatever reason, I did not panic and I did not run, but continued to walk for a moment, watching it as closely as it was watching me. I finally stopped in my tracks and froze with fear as my rationale started to slip. I then simply lost track of it once I realized that I turned back around and began to run back towards the entrance. I made it there and was truly thankful that whatever that was over. Whatever I saw then has truly stuck with me, and I think about it very often. It just didn't make sense and truly intrigues me to this day, and really started to upheave my belief systems at the time. I think the scariest part is how closely it mimicked my movement and the fact that I could just feel the heaviness in the air. Since then, I have had multiple truly unexplainable, from what I can come up with, paranormal experiences. These include audible whispers while awake that others can hear, figures watching from windows, and other phenomena. Please let me know if you would like to hear more, and I will certainly detail them. Thank you for listening. Eighth story. I helped a Wendigo, and I regret it all. When this happened, I was living in a small town with lots of forest nearby. It was small, and everybody was friendly with each other, living in an area where everyone knows everyone. My ma and pa didn't really take stranger danger seriously. Don't hop in a stranger's van. Don't take candy from people you don't know well, is the most I was told. Being young at the time I was taught this. I wasn't told why. I wasn't told of how monstrous humans could truly be. In my innocent mind, I saw no reasons for a person to want to hurt others. I believed this for most other creatures too. I wasn't afraid of animals or insects. So, it was no surprise that this would have happened. Seeing how stupid I was. It was in early spring, and I was going for a usual walk through the neighborhood and into the local woods, admiring the flowers and listening to the birds' calls. I was drawn further into the darkness that was that fucking forest. Soon, I didn't even know where I was. The trees weren't familiar. I was deeper into the woods than I'd gone before. And just before I traced my steps back home, I heard something. Help. The voice was dry, raspy, and quiet. It sounded strained, like whoever was speaking felt pain to do so. I turned back, trying to find out who or what was calling for me, although my innocent mind was certain it was a person. Over here. I followed the voice and soon found the creature in front of me, its long limbs wrapped in the thorny brambles it was trapped in, its face covered by its long, blood-soaked hair. Please, help me, child. Despite what I wanted to do, my gut told me not to go closer to it. It was dangerous. I ignored the feeling. As I tried to remove the brambles from the creature's body, I only succeeded in cutting my hands. I can't get you out, I sadly told the creature. Try harder. You don't want me to die here, do you? It shook its head, removing the few vines I'd managed to pull off its antlers. Of course I don't want you to die. I then remembered my mother's pruning shears. I'd seen her use them to cut plants before, so they should work, right? They'll be right back. I can get some tools to cut you free. As I got up to leave, it grabbed my leg. Don't go. I'll be lonely. We can free me later. The creature pulled me back down to the ground. I stared at it again, noticing all the bones poking through its skin. That's all it really was. Skin and bones. Breaking the eerie silence, it spoke again. My name is Inoki. What is yours? I didn't hesitate to respond. I'm T. After that, we started to talk more. Until the sun started going down, then I went home. That night I stayed awake in bed, wondering about my new friend. How did he get stuck there? Anyway, the next day, I brought the pruning shears, and with some effort, I removed the brambles. Inoki never thanked me for the help. He just tried to stand up, but he was too wounded to move. I innocently asked, "Do you want me to go get my parents? They have band-aids." But he shook his head. I need more than that. I need food to get stronger. And so, I ran home and got some food, mostly biscuits and some bread. I can't eat that. He turned away from the food in disgust. What do you eat then? He looked around and then pointed at a small bird. It had gotten tangled in the nearby brambles. It was thrashing around, trying to get free. Go get that for me. I remember feeling scared in that moment. I loved birds. Whenever I found a wounded one, I'd try to take care of it before my pa would take it to the vet, while secretly just putting it down. But without even realizing what I was doing, I'd already removed the bird from the brambles. I watched in horror as Inoki ate the poor thing. He didn't seem to like it, but he did anyway. I kept visiting him every day, bringing him more birds or other poor animals for weeks. He was looking better each day, yet still bone thin, until eventually I came to him with another bird. He wasn't sitting in the place he always sat. I called out for him, but he didn't come. Then I heard the trees above me shake. I looked up, just in time to run as it jumped down and chased after me. It caught up to me in no time. It had longer legs and was faster, and it grabbed my leg, and its claws sunk into me. I screamed and screamed until half of the local neighborhood came running into the woods. One or two even had guns, but Inoki got away before he could be killed. I never set foot into the woods again. After I was patched up and told my story to the local newspaper, I was told about what Inoki really was. A Wendigo. I was told I was goddamn lucky to have gotten away, but stupid to have even helped him. My parents moved away after that, and I was properly taught about stranger danger. Ninth story. There is something in my forest. For context, I'm a 27-year-old woman. My boyfriend and I were able to purchase 15 acres of land this year, right next to a national forest in the Carolinas. It has always been my dream to live in a forest on a mountain, and we were so excited when we found the land. It was priced so low and is a 5-minute drive from the lake, so we of course grabbed it up as fast as we could get the loan approved. We put a small mobile home in the middle of the property where we currently live while we have our home built about 3 acres away. There is not much built now, just the cement slab and a few metal beams and roof. It's going to be a barn dominium. Now on to the story. We moved onto the land in late May and everything seemed great. A few weeks ago, I started taking my 2 dogs out for walks around the forest to check where the property lines were, and also just to enjoy the scenery as it truly is beautiful. We got to where the property line ended and the national forest began, and I wanted to go further in as I knew there was a trail you could take nearby that leads to the top of the mountain and a rest area where I planned to call my boyfriend and have him come get me and the dogs. The actual hike itself might take about 1.5 hours, and there is a road the rangers take to get to the top that he could drive up. We were about halfway to the trail, or so I thought, when my German Shepherd, Crush, takes off into the woods barking. He's usually very well trained and comes when called, but he was hellbent on chasing something. Luckily, my other dog isn't as excitable, and she stayed by me. We went deeper into the forest looking for my dog when I heard what I thought was a wild boar. If you have never heard a boar, imagine what you assume a demon crawling out of hell sounds like, and that's pretty much it. I got nervous as I know a boar could easily gut my dog with their tusk and started yelling out for Crush to come. I could hear him barking angrily, and we made our way to where the sounds were coming from. I found him looking up, barking and snarling near a large tree, and tried to pull him away. He wouldn't budge. I had to literally pick up this 80-pound dog and shuffle carry him about 100 feet away where I set him down. My other dog stayed by the tree whining, her tail in between her legs. I called for her to come to me, and she did a 180 and took off in the other direction. I looked up in the tree but couldn't really see much, so I just chalked it up to one big-ass raccoon. It took about 2 hours, but I was finally back on my land with the dogs. I told my boyfriend about it when we got home, and he recommended not taking them out too far without leashes as to avoid this again. When I asked him what he thought it was, he agreed either a opossum or raccoon, but I told him it didn't explain the boar sound. He just said, "It's the woods, there's a lot of animals," and left it at that. A few days later, I was working from home when my dogs start going nuts. Crush started snarling and jumping up at the window. I yelled for them to stop barking, and since I had to make a call, I let the dogs out with intention to bring them back, and afterwards, it took all of 10 minutes. When I opened the door, my little dog was sitting on the porch and bolted inside. Crush was gone. I stepped out and started calling for him, scanning the woods for a big furry black, but I could not see or hear him, so I started into the woods calling for him. I made my way to where the house is being built, and he was standing by the right-hand side of it. I called for him. He stood there frozen, ignoring me, so I walked over to him when I saw what he was staring at. It was very large and on all fours. I don't know what it was. At first my initial thought was a manged hairless bear because of its size, but there are not bears in that forest. I double-checked before we moved in because I was worried about the dogs getting into it with one. It also was lean, so I know it was not a bear as it was too thin to be one healthy enough to walk. There was fur or hair, but only on the back, and it was either dark brown or black. I couldn't see a face, but could tell it did not have an animal snout. I grabbed Crush's collar and tried to tug him towards the construction, trying not to make any sudden movements. I felt the thing watching me as I led Crush into the middle of the concrete. I didn't take my eyes off it. It was about 10 yards away when I heard the boar noise again. It was coming from it. Crush started barking and jumping towards it with me attached to him via collar. I just said, "Fuck that," jerked Crush back towards me, and started running back towards the mobile home. I slammed the door, locking it behind me, and grabbed my gun. I called my boyfriend a few times before he answered and started yelling at him to come home. "There is something on the property." He was home in 10 minutes and took his truck over to the construction. When he got back, he said he did not see anything. It's been a couple weeks since then, and this past weekend I saw it again. My boyfriend had to work late, so I was home with the dogs watching TV when my little one scratched at the door to be let out to potty. Crush followed her out, and I left them to do their business. When I opened the door, little one was shaking and could not get in fast enough. She hid under the dining table and refused to come out. I called out for Crush and could not see him as he's a black dog in the woods at night. I grabbed the flashlight and walked the perimeter of the house looking for him. I saw a big furry black, but at the back of the house where the tree line began, and called for him. He didn't move. I started towards him when I heard a bark from behind me. I felt my heart and stomach drop. I wanted to cry because I knew what I was looking at, and it wasn't my dog. He was behind me. I felt this overwhelming feeling of fear and dread and anger, and did something insane and stupid. I yelled at it and threw sticks. I told it to get away from us, get off my land, that I wanted to fucking kill it. I seriously thought I was losing my mind because before I knew it, I was running towards it. I was about 5 feet away when that thing leapt up and into the woods. Its back legs were so long I thought it was going to kick me. It smelled like earth and rot. I got a better look at the back of its body. It was borderline human looking. Long limbs, short torso. Luckily, my moment of insanity was over and my dumb ass didn't chase it into the woods. I was mildly pleased with myself that I got it to run away. I started heading back towards Crush and the house when I heard the boar noises again, only they weren't just behind me but all around the woods. I told my boyfriend. He thinks I was seeing things. I called my dad, who told me to burn sage on the property and have a shaman come and bless the land, as he thinks it's a skinwalker. He's Blackfoot. I do not know what to do. I bought some cables to hook the dogs to when they go outside, so they can't go too far. I carry my gun with me anytime I have to be outside. I love this property. I love the forest and the mountains. I hate that I'm afraid anytime I walk outside. Has anyone seen something like this before? Does anyone have an idea what this is and how to keep it away from us? My boyfriend doesn't go into the woods much, so I doubt if he will ever see it, so I just sound like a crazy woo-woo lady to him. 10th story. I think there is a Wendigo in the Minnesota woods. First things first, I wasn't there, but I was the first person he told. This happened in southeast Minnesota. I am not going to be telling the exact location, but it was in a smallish forest on a long bike trail. One more quick thing. It was really windy this day. My friend, who we will call S, and his father were on a bike ride. It was about a 12-mile bike ride. So they are doing their thing when about 5 miles and S sees what he thinks is a deer. They keep going and S sees a flash of brown next to them in the trees, and it is like this thing is running next to them, like keeping pace, but he doesn't hear anything. He points it out to his dad, and his father says that it's probably a deer, but he agrees it is really weird. So they keep going. They get to this little beach where they usually rest and look at the river. S notices something feels off. He notices that first of all, there is no trees swaying. Secondly, there is no animal noises. Then he realizes he didn't see any animals the whole time they were there, except the deer. The silence was heavy. It was like every animal left. The woods were silent. S tells his dad that he isn't feeling very well and that he wants to go home. His dad begrudgingly agrees. They get on their bikes and S is almost hyper-aware of his surroundings. They go for a while until S sees a flash of brown again and antlers. They keep going until they hit this clearing. The clearing looks like a big field with trees around it and a bike trail through it. As they enter the clearing, S looks back, and there is the fucking beast standing on its hind legs, and he said it was like 9 feet tall. It had antlers, and it looked like it had a deer head or some shit. He said he was terrified. They finally got out of the woods and the wind was back and there was animal noises again. I think this was a Wendigo, but I am not sure. I honestly don't know if I believe him, but we are in Minnesota and it wouldn't be impossible. But are we a bit too far south for Wendigos? If you have any ideas or theories, please let me know. Okay, apparently I haven't hit the minimum word count, so I'll give you more minor details. We are pretty much at the bottom of Minnesota. Nowhere close to Rosisu, Minnesota. Like I said, it was really windy this day, like really windy. I think S is kinda sensitive to the paranormal. Just a little bit. Although the Wendigo isn't really paranormal. They have been biking on this trail before. They didn't go the whole way, they went about half. I think it is too short to be a Wendigo. Is it possible it is a skinwalker? I looked on a map, and the tribes that were in this area were the Dakota Sioux. This area usually has a lot of wildlife. It was before noon when this happened. He didn't see any other people other than him and his dad. Neither of us know what to think about this. I'll ask him about what it smelled like, or if it smelled weird in the area.